నమస్కారం. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం విద్యార్థిని విద్యార్థులకు స్వాగతం.
This program is on critical reading and interpretation, critical and interpretative reading. This is the book which we are using at our study centers. This is a first year foundation course which we have devoted to reading skills and writing skills. To speak on the subject today, I have with me in the studios Dr. Malti Krishnan.
Hello.
Associate Professor at the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages. Malti has taught at the SNDT Women's University at Bombay, Mumbai, and she is currently the Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Extension Services at Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages. Malti is also the author of the lessons which we are going to discuss today. Also here with us in the studios is Mrs. Murdeshwar, Mrs. Meena Murdeshwar, who is an academician who has taught at different levels in schools and colleges. She has taught English and she is also a freelance journalist. Welcome to the studio, Meena.
Hello viewers, it's nice to be here today.
I would like to begin with Dr. Malti Krishnan, who is going to tell us today about critical reading and interpretation. Malti.
Thank you, Pushpa. A great deal of our everyday life is spent in reading. We read all kinds of material. As soon as we get up in the morning, we look at the daily newspaper to get our information about the world. Then when we go into our workplace or school or college, we encounter a lot of printed matter which we have to deal with. Then there are other kinds of reading that we have to do, like filling in forms, looking at ads, looking at reports, and so many varied kinds of things. Now, the way we read each of these is different. We try to read certain things at a very fast rate. At other times, we spend a lot of time reading what we read. And so it will depend upon the kind of text that we are looking at. If it is something which we have to look for quick information, then we scan the text. At other times, we might look at the text in a intensive kind of manner so that we get the most out of it. This is what we do when we read our textbooks. Or we could just look up a railway timetable or a telephone directory and then get the quick information that we want. So we have various strategies by which we read what we read, and the speed at which we read also depends upon the kind of text. So we will have a quick look at the types of text and the various kinds of text that we may have to encounter in our everyday life. The first exposure at school is to narrative kinds of text, where children are given a lot of stories to read. Now here we look at how things are recounted. We get involved in the story element. Now there's another kind of text which gives us a lot of information upon a certain theme. This we call expository writing. There could be conversational writing, like parts of stories. In a novel you might find certain dialogues, or we might read plays, or we might just have a kind of a description of what is happening and through the speech of the characters involved. So this would be the conversational kind of text that we encounter. Another kind would be the argumentative, where an author tries to put across his point of view. That is, he argues why his opinion is right. So this way we have so many different kinds. One could be descriptive, descriptions of locations, places, and or people or events. So we have different kinds of text with which we deal, and according to the kinds of text we also modulate the way we read, the strategy we employ, and the speed with which we read. So this is a kind of a short introduction to tell you what really reading involves. Now if we write something or when we read something, there is both for the reader as well as for the writer, there is a purpose. The reader reads, as we have just heard, about how certain things, we want certain things, and therefore that is our purpose in reading. Now, when the writer writes, he also has a similar purpose in mind. So, what is effective reading? Effective reading is getting at this purpose that the writer has in mind. So, we need to know what exactly is the intention of the author while he is reading. This is the writer's purpose or intention in writing what he does, and we as readers try to understand what this purpose of the writer is and try to make meaning out of the purpose that the writer has intended while he wrote. Now, every word we read, or the words that we read, the sentences that we read, will have a literal kind of meaning that is called denotation. Now, often it happens that the words do not just mean what they mean. We go beyond the surface level of words and sentences, and that is what we call connotation, or the meanings of words in a particular context. So, we need to, when we read, it's not just the words that we are reading, we are also reading the context in which the words are couched. So, this makes for deeper levels of reading, and this is how we move on to critical and interpretative reading. So, the writer says something and we try to make meaning of what the writer says. Now, let us explore this a little further. Now, there is another way of looking at it. Now, there are certain things which we read which are just statements of fact. At other times, we have a kind of an opinion coming through these facts. Let us take the example of newspaper articles. Now, you might have the same event, but it would be reported in two different ways by two different newspapers. Now, why is this so? Now, this is because it is influenced by the policy that that newspaper adopts. This newspaper might be in tune with a particular organization, political party or government, and therefore it reflects the opinion of that particular reporter or newspaper editor. Whereas another newspaper will have a contrary kind of a report. Now, as readers, what do? We try to sift fact from opinion. Now, here are the two reports. How do we gauge them? How do we get at the actual facts and what can we evaluate as opinion? So, all the time reading becomes a kind of an evaluative process. We are judging what we are reading. We are not just taking in information. Now, I would like to refer you to a passage, 3 or 4 lines in the unit on reading, that is unit 12. This is from a novel by Anita Desai, and here is the character talking about a young boy saying he knew he could never earn enough in Thule to help his whole family. He would have to go to Bombay. Bombay was a great city, a rich city, a city crowded with people who had jobs, earned money and made fortunes. He had to get there somehow. How? When? That was still not clear to him. Now, in this passage, what we get is not just information. We are trying to understand, we get to understand the emotional state of the character. So, writing would mean conveying information, or it could mean reflecting an emotional state of mind and attitude, or it could mean persuading someone to take some follow-up action. This is what happens in an advertisement. You have a beautiful example of a tourist advertisement in this unit, and here what we see is tourists are invited to visit the city of Hyderabad again and again. The enduring charms of the place is thrown up to the tourist, and this is what persuades them to visit the city again and again. So, we have these 3 kinds of writing, 3 kinds of intentions. One is to convey information, one is to convey a kind of emotional state or attitude of mind, or another could be to persuade someone to take action.
So what you said, Malti, is that the writer's intention should be understood by the reader. The reader should try to gauge the writer's intention. That will help them to read critically. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is the first step in critical reading, getting at what the writer actually is aiming at. Does he want us to get the information, or does he want something further?
You referred to denotation and connotation. You
Yes.
said that we perhaps don't need to read subject matter as it is given as words on the page. Perhaps we need to read a little beyond the words on the page.
Yes.
We've had lessons before this where we have spoken about reading the text itself. You referred also to the narrative, where the story element is more important. So you're reading just to get the information. Whereas at the second level, where we are looking for the intention of the author, we don't really read just the text. We read a little beyond the text.
We were talking about clues. Now, sometimes these clues have to be looked for. Things are not explicitly stated, and we have to look for these clues. I'll just give you one example, and that is also in the unit. If we read something like this, "He too was a washerman, and what do you think," said Javni proudly. "He washed clothes for the Maharaja when he came here." Now here, the author is also talking to us, telling us about Javni's husband, the washerman, as well as Javni's attitude towards him. So we get a feel of how Javni wishes to look at her husband. We also get to know the writer's comment on the character Javni and how he wishes us to look at her. So we get such clues, and that is how we proceed with our reading and understanding. Now this is what contributes to enjoyment while we read. All these clues that we catch which are not really stated. Very often we get our clues from the conjunctions that are used, or the sentence patterns. Now you could have very short sentences which might convey a very clipped tone, or you could have complicated sentence patterns, and this might reflect the complexity of the thought processes at work. So this is how, through words, through sentence patterns, so much of it is communicated, and when we are good readers, we are able to tackle the word level, the sentence level, the discourse level efficiently. This contributes to good reading.
So it comes from practice. You say that it's
Yes,
possible
yes.
to train oneself in this. We probably do it all the time in our own mother tongues. We probably do it when we are reading books which we enjoy reading. We don't just read for instance, if we read a detective novel or we read a mystery or a suspense, we're probably trying to look for the person, the culprit. We're trying to solve the mystery ourselves in our minds while we read. So we are doing that critical reading all the time.
Yes.
Would you say we're doing that?
We do. Whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, we are doing it all the time. And it is not just literature or just the reading text. We do it all the time when we are listening to people also. Now, listening and reading are parallel processes. So what we do while we listen, we also do while we read. The text is talking to us, and all the time the sounds of the text are entering our ears. So it's a kind of a transferred medium, that is all. So just as we evaluate people when we look at them and talk to them, we also evaluate what the writer means while we are faced with the text.
Can we just give a short short interval here to the critical and interpretative reading theoretically, and ask Meena to give us her version or her experience of critical and interpretative reading?
As you know, as Malti has just told us, there are different types of texts. There are descriptive texts, there are argumentative texts. These texts give you both sides of a particular question. There are narrative texts which of course tell a story. She told you about the conversational and the expository texts. These texts, the writer writes, but when the reader reads, he has to be trained to interpret and analyze them. What were the various styles that the author has used? What were his intentions? And what opinions does he have or wish to convey to you? The intentions of a writer would mainly come to tell you the purpose of his writing. This purpose could be, as Malti has just told us, to convey information or to evoke emotions. Let us for a moment also consider the intentions of a writer who wishes to persuade you. By way of persuasion, I would like you to look at some interesting matrimonial ads. As you know, these try to sell a product also. They try to sell a bridegroom or a bride and necessarily use superlative terms, superlative adjectives, lots of adjectives. You would also know that ads charge by the word, and therefore people try, the writer who is trying to insert this ad tries to put in as much meaning into as few words as he can, and in this they try to convey their preferences, their prejudices, their biases, and try to sell you a daughter or a son as a prospective groom for the people who are a groom or bride, for the people who are reading the ad. Let us take this about the Hindu, beautiful, fair, accomplished. Now look at the next few words: 31 MBA IFB ICWA. Now these are of course the fair, accomplished girl's credentials or her degrees, and we know from them that she is 31 years old. She is also a Singapore PR holder. PR, you might wonder what it is, but for the person who is looking for a Singapore permanent resident, he knows what PR means. She is unfortunately divorced, but she is innocent. She is God-fearing, which means she possibly is very regular about her pujas. She is home-loving, which would show that she is possibly good at cooking and doing up the house, but she is also issueless, and therefore, as they say in other parlance, she has no encumbrances. Now they have tried to make this beautiful Hindu girl as pleasant as possible. The only bit that goes against her seems to be the divorce, but that they have put in only one adjective. Look at the number of other adjectives that they have used to describe this girl. We will go on to another one. Here you can see the biases of the people who have been settled in USA. They are US settled Telugu parents inviting proposals for their daughter who has been born and brought up in the US, but has learnt Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi in the US and India, which means she has possibly stayed in India for a while, is familiar with Indian customs, possibly talks her mother tongue, speaks in her mother tongue, and is also tall, slim and fair complexioned. She is 30/168. I suppose that means her height and weight.
No, it must be
weight
her
and height, or
and
age and
height,
weight.
really, yeah.
Oh, age and height, yeah. She is seeking medical professionals who are willing to relocate to the USA. Again, here you see that the parents are seeking an Indian medical professional who is willing to come to them and settle in the US. The adjectives used here in both these ads are very peculiar to matrimonial ads. Things like tall, slim, fair complexioned, they are superlatives. The girl might be tall by any standard or short, slim, fair complexioned. We are not given the standard here. We are just given a whole set of adjectives. But the intention or the purpose of the writer of this ad is very clear. Any disadvantage that the girl has been glossed over. All her positive qualities have been talked about. When men want a bride, there is a different language used altogether. Men do not ever seem to be having any disadvantages, or if there are any, these are glossed over. Gloss meaning not made much of, they are played down. Played down again means that they are not fronted. They are not fronted in the ad, they are put in somewhere in between. Take for instance the next one, brides wanted. alliance invited from slim attractive girls below 38. Now, that could mean a lot of girls can apply. They can apply from 18 onwards because they are still under 38. For a bachelor who is in his early 40s yet looks smart and looks much younger. He is 170 by 68, which would give his height and his weight. These are all important details for an ad. He is also a teetotaler. The word teetotaler means does not drink alcoholic drinks. He is a non-smoker and he is a financially sound bank manager in Dubai. Now, look at the bit they are playing down. Vision poor but correctable. They haven't talked about it having been corrected. So, he still possibly has to go through some intervention for this. Girl and family are the only consideration. Reply with photo, which is a must. He has to see the girl's photograph. But the photograph is also returnable. Please note the email address. You are the lucky one. If you are to get this handsome bachelor, you are the lucky one at hotmail.com. Ads, particularly matrimonial ads, tell you a lot about the person who is writing the ad. They tell you more about the person who is writing the ad, in fact, than the person who is being addressed or the person who the ad is talking about. These make for interesting reading because the intention of the writer in this case is to get the best possible bride or groom for the product or the person that they are advertising.
As I mentioned earlier, most of our everyday conversation also has a lot of figurative use of language, and this is we most of the time talk idiomatically. We throw in a proverb or two or say things in two senses. Advertisements also make use of this. I'll just quote one that amused me a lot. It's a bilingual kind of an advertisement in Hindi and English. It's for petrol. And it says, "Yahan petrol ke saath vishwas bhi milta hai." Now, this is what makes for the creative use of language. So, if you move on to the field of creativity from the literal level, then you get so much more joy out of language, and it gives you a lot of information along with entertainment. And this is what everyday language revolves around, and we bring that to the literary text. Now,
can we just talk about figurative use of language?
Yes. Now, when we talk of figurative use of language, very often we talk about metaphor, simile, symbolism and imagery. If we could just look at these in a little more detail, I'll take some examples from the text itself. You could look at this example: a veil of mystery surrounded her death, or the road was a ribbon of moonlight. Now, here there is a comparison. Both metaphor and simile revolve around comparisons. Now, why do we compare one thing to the other? So that it becomes more intelligent to the reader. The reader is able to capture not only the meaning, the surface meaning, but the sense underlying that meaning. So, when you say a veil of mystery, the mystery is like a veil, but it's not explicitly stated in a metaphor. The mystery is a veil, the veil is a mystery. It's that kind of a thing. And why is this metaphor used? It's because things are not very clear. Once something is veiled,
they have this element of similarity. Even though they are not identical, there is an element of similarity which makes the writer use one for the other. In fact, he says, instead of saying a veil is like the mystery is like the veil, or the veil is like the mystery. He says a veil of mystery surrounded her death. The same thing happens in the next one.
The road was a ribbon of moonlight. So it evokes that image of a ribbon. The road is something very, very concrete, and we might think of it as something very dull. But the beautiful image of a ribbon of moonlight makes the whole image really
Picturesque.
picturize and touch our emotions. So this is what it is. On the other hand, you could have explicit similes. You have one or two examples of that, where it's not just a veiled kind of a metaphor, but an explicit.
comparison.
It's like her smile was like a ray of sunshine. So you know exactly why it is. And there is always a principle behind the comparison, both in metaphor as well as
And
in
the use of the word like.
like. And the like makes it, the conjunction like makes it very, very explicit. Now, we could move a little further into imagery and symbolism. Now, there's a reference to a Canadian novel in the unit, and here there is this old woman weaving a patchwork quilt. Now, this patchwork quilt, this weaving of the patchwork quilt, stands for the interweaving of her memories down the path of life. Now her children's, her grandchildren's lives are also interwoven with her own life. So the patchwork quilt of many colored rags gives us a kind of an indication of what kind of embroidery her own life is like. So this is what we mean by imagery, and you have this image of the patchwork quilt right through the novel. So the thread of her life comes throughout the novel. So this is what
life
makes it
is like, her life is like a patchwork quilt.
quilt, yeah.
So the writer actually manages to create a word picture.
Yes.
That's what you mean when you say
Yes.
image.
So it's there, the image is in the background.
something which
and
is abstract is
Yeah.
concretized, and the writer manages to help the reader to understand exactly what he wants to convey.
Similarly, you could have outside objects sympathizing with emotional states of characters. For example, in Hardy's novels, whenever he wants to picturize gloom, despair, then there is a dark water running behind, running by the side. So you have a river which is dark in color. Now this reflects the kind of emotional
in his
state, the gloom in his state. Now Hardy's descriptions are very, very picturesque, and you know, you could devote a lot of time just reading and analyzing the picturesqueness of his descriptions.
In
and
Indian
how,
literature, don't we have R.K. Narayan who does that
Yes.
through his Malgudi?
Yes.
R.K. Narayan's Malgudi is, I think, closer home, and our students and viewers would probably understand the example better, where we have the setting which is so clearly what creates the mood and the atmosphere for the story. Don't we have that? And I'm sure they have watched Swami and Friends in the serial, the televised serials on Swami, which clearly picturized a town called Malgudi. Please write back to us, giving your comments, suggestions for improvement of this program, and any further inquiries that you have. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
ఈ మన ఉన్నత విద్యా కార్యక్రమాలపై మీ సందేహాలు, సలహాలు, సూచనలు పంపవలసిన చిరునామా: డైరెక్టర్, ఆడియో విజువల్ ప్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ రీసెర్చ్ సెంటర్, డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ, ప్రొఫెసర్ జి రామిరెడ్డి మార్గ్, రోడ్ నంబర్ 46, జూబ్లీ హిల్స్, హైదరాబాద్ 500033.